Hare Krishna. All of you are welcome today for the Sunday program here. And we had the appearance day of Srila Prabhupada immediately after Janmashtami. And I was delighted to know that you had this grand celebration, the 50th anniversary of Srila Prabhupada's appearing and coming to Perth over here. So on this day, I thought I'll talk about Srila Prabhupada's life. So I'll go over his life. We'll talk about some key incidents or key characteristics of what he did and how he did in various phases of his life. So I'll use the name of Srila Prabhupada as an acronym, and I'll divide his life into 8 stages. And we'll talk about what we can observe and learn from his life for our own, for facing our challenges in life and for growing spiritually in our own life. Now, if you look at Srila Prabhupada, in which year did he appear? Does anyone know? 1896. Yes. And till how long was he here with us? Yes, in a manifested form, he was there. He's still there in his books. But now, so during this period, he met his spiritual master in 1922. So we'll take this timeline and we will discuss characteristics based on this. Now, before this itself, now we see that he was a man of principles. He grew up in India at a time when India was under colonial rule. And slowly, India had started awakening to the huge exploitation that was being done by the British. The economic exploitation, the cultural devastation, the cultural uprooting of the faith primarily, not so much explicit devastation. But so when Prabhupada was getting educated at that he was in Bengal, that was the center of the Indian independence movement. And in 1920, Gandhiji had launched the first major struggle for independence. That was the non-cooperation movement. So at that time, Prabhupada also was born in a family that was very spiritual. He says that every morning he would wake up to the sound of the artis. So he had a very deep spiritual inclination, attraction. When he was just less than 10 years old, he had organized a Rath Yatra festival. When his hands were not long enough to reach to the 2 sides of a mridanga. At that time itself, his father had said that he should learn mridanga. And he had arranged a teacher for him. And Prabhupada, he says, may he become a great devotee of Radharani. So he had that spiritual inclination strongly. And he felt that India's spiritual culture would be destroyed while India was under colonial rule. So he joined the Indian independence movement. And at that time, nowadays the word activist. Nowadays the word activist has become very cheap. Anybody can say that, oh, I am an environmental activist, I am this activist, I am that activist. And all that they do is maybe just like some posts on Instagram, post some pictures on social media. That people are called as keyboard warriors. They think that just typing something, they become big warriors. But Prabhupada at that time, he graduated through college. Scottish Church College was the college he went to. But as an expression of non-cooperation with the British government, he refused the degree. Now, this was a huge sacrifice. He did not accept the degree for which he had studied for so many years because he didn't want to be a part of the British government at all. So the cause at that time was independence struggle, but whatever be the cause one is fighting for right from his youth, we see that he was ready to sacrifice, pay a heavy cost for his principles. That time he would also wear khadi clothes. Khadi was not just a fashion statement, it was a political statement at that time. Wearing those clothes meant that you rejected the mills, the cloth that was brought from the mills in Manchester. And so that was right from the beginning. When Prabhupada met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, was his spiritual master. His spiritual master observed him and he saw this person. He's young, intelligent, articulate. Prabhupada was good in English. And the first thing that Prabhupada was told by his spiritual masters, you are educated, you are intelligent, you know English, why don't you spread the message of Lord Chaitanya in the world? Now, Prabhupada was Abhay at that time, he was taken aback. Who is this saint? In my first meeting, he's giving me a mission for my entire life. And Prabhupada felt he was already working. He said that we cannot really work without independence. So Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, they had a very vibrant, robust discussion. After that, he said that the spiritual raising of consciousness is the most important thing. Prabhupada agreed. And while he was a missionary, see, one tendency is that when we take up any one cause, we become inspired by that, we can lose perspective and go to extremes. Like when we make one thing important, we make it so important that we trivialize everything else. But that's what we see. Srila Prabhupada met his spiritual master. The next thing he exhibited was, he said that if I had not been married, I would have immediately joined my spiritual master's mission. I would have become a full-time missionary. But he felt that, he speaks that, now that I was married, I had a child, it would be unfair for my family if I just renounced. So then Prabhupada took responsibility. So sometimes spirituality becomes an excuse for irresponsibility. And Prabhupada did not simply think of that as a material responsibility, I have to take care of my family. That was there. Prabhupada saw it as dharma, and he saw it also as an opportunity to serve his spiritual master. So he decided, he had not taken up a degree. So the avenue of going into the government and getting a secure job was closed for him. That's what many people at that time who were educated in the main British education system would choose that trajectory. So Prabhupada decided to go on the track of business. His father had a cloth business. He went to the pharmacy business. So now at that time, Prabhupada thought that now that I have become a grahastha, grahasthas are meant to give charity. So he says, if I earn a lot of money, then I can give a lot of charity to my spiritual master's mission. And that way I can assist. And for that purpose, Srila Prabhupada during his grahastha ashram worked extremely hard. If we consider, let me try this, I always fail. And if you know what is this? Yeah, that's an insult to the map of India. This is the map of India. So, this is Kolkata. This is Mumbai. This is Prayag. What is special about these three places? Yeah, these are the three places where Srila Prabhupada had his business. Now, I have a friend who is doing his PhD in pre-independence history of India, social history. So I was discussing with him, says in those times, people would not relocate so much, especially not business people. If you're in the government would transfer you and then you could relocate. Then everything was taken care of. The government would provide quarters, there would be already ready job. But if you have to relocate your entire business, that's not easy. And in those times, there were no flights. So Prabhupada would have to take trains. So my point I'm making is, Prabhupada worked extremely hard in his grahastha ashram. Starting a business in one place, trying to expand it, then trying to relocate it to another place, to a third place. His purpose was not just to become wealthy. His purpose was through wealth to serve his spiritual master. He diligently tried that. If you read Srila Prabhupada's books, now we'll see that he quotes so many verses. I've always had this question, when did Prabhupada get time to read? Because he had a busy grahastha life, he had many children, he had a big business. So that was primarily when he would travel for his business. But when he was traveling for business, it was not necessarily comfortable. It's okay. Okay. So, little, that's okay. Actually, a little lower. That's okay, this much enough. So, he would travel extensively, and in the trains, he would read. And it's not easy in the trains. The trains of India are not like the trains. Maybe, do you have trains here in Australia, subway or something? Here it's quite comfortable. If you see a local in Mumbai, feel as if you are cramped in your mother's womb. Like, especially, but the trains pre-independence were even worse. If any of you have seen movies of pre-independence India, the trains would be cramped full and people would actually sit on top of the trains and travel. And it is not that Prabhupada was very wealthy that he would travel first class, but he would manage to read. So his spiritual orientation was always there. But it is not that for the sake of bhakti, he gave up his dharma. He was responsible. Then, now he continued in the Grahastha Ashram till almost 1955. Let's move forward. So, from around 1940s onwards, now he was always trying to think of ways in which he could further the spiritual master's mission. So from 1940 onwards, and especially from 1955 to around 1960, that is the next stage was, his role was assistance. His spiritual master departed from the world in 1937. So he thought, how do I assist my spiritual master's mission now? Let me assist my senior god brothers. In the Gaudiya Mutt hierarchy, Prabhupada was relatively quite junior. He was not a person who was living in the temple. He was not a sannyasi. Bhakti Thakur he initiated his first disciple in 1905. He started initiating, not 1905, 1908, he initiated one of his first disciples. He started initiating actively and preaching from 1919. But he had disciples who were sannyasis and who had become gurus. Prabhupada thought, let me assist them. So whichever part of the world he would go to, if his godbrothers were there nearby, he would get business people from his contacts to come to the temple. He would invite them to the class of his godbrothers. Then gradually, as Srila Prabhupada started retiring in his mission, retiring from his Grahastha Ashram, after having settled his financial responsibilities and family responsibilities, then he joined his spiritual, one of his godbrothers' mission. He stayed in their ashram and he was assisting them. He thought, that's naturally how I'll serve my spiritual master. But unfortunately, he started encountering obstacles. That after the spiritual master departed, after Bhakti-Siddhanta Thakur departed, there was a fracture. There was almost a rupture, more than a fracture, in the mission. And the Gaudiya Mutt, which had been very powerful, 64 centers across India, 3 centers outside India, not very big centers, but one in Rangoon, one in Munich, one in London. They all just fragmented. And everybody was concerned about just protecting their property, and it started becoming more like a temple, a ritualistic Indian temple, where there was not much zeal for sharing Krishna Bhakti. It became more like a cultural place for coming and worshipping and doing some puja and taking some donation. Prabhupada wanted to print magazines and distribute. His spiritual master had a magazine called Harmonist. He said, let's expand it. I'll get the sponsorship. I will increase the circulation. Prabhupada got the sponsorship. He said, no. The matha he was in, the guru of that matha started feeling insecure. He said, this person is coming here He's doing more service than me. Then people will start feeling insecure. Prabhupada would give talks when when his godbrother was not there, and people started appreciating his talks. And some people asked, can you become my guru? And then that godbrother started feeling, no, this is the Arbata. I should be the guru, not you. So Prabhupada started experiencing obstacles everywhere. One time there was a Vyas Puja ceremony of his spiritual master, and Prabhupada, although he was a little junior godbrother, he gave a fiery speech. He said that, our spiritual master did not build a matha so that we just eat and sleep. We should be sharing the message. We should be preaching vigorously. It was appreciated as a talk, but nobody did anything. Then Prabhupada recognized that if the mission has to be carried on, then I have to do it on my own. So after playing this role of being an assistant from 62 to 65, Prabhupada focused on the writing books. In 1944 itself, he had started the Back to Godhead magazine, and he had been distributing that. It had been very difficult because the World War was going on at that time. Prabhupada started that, and Prabhupada had such dedication, but at the same time, he was very open to learning. One of the biggest problems with religious groups is that religion often leads to a sense of certainty that goes into arrogance. I know everything. You are all ignorant. You just listen to me and become enlightened. That was not Prabhupada's mood. When Prabhupada was working very hard, he would himself, there were times when he was running the magazine and he did not have enough money to actually have his own breakfast. So he would still buy paper so that the magazine could be printed. And then when he would go to the printer would ask, Swamiji, did you have any breakfast? Prabhupada would not say no. But when Prabhupada would not reply, he would understand. And he would try to arrange something some days for Prabhupada. So he was extremely dedicated in printing the magazine. And unfortunately, nobody seemed to be interested. Then there was a postman who met Prabhupada, and he said, Swamiji, he had brought some mail for Prabhupada. He said, Swamiji, you are working so hard writing these magazines, but people read magazine and throw it away. You can write books. Now, Prabhupada did not go on an ego trip. Do you know who I am? I am a sannyasi. I am a guru. I've descended from the spiritual world. You think you can instruct me? No. A genuine devotee is always open to the signals of Krishna from everywhere. Prabhupada felt, this is my spiritual master speaking. And then Prabhupada shifted to writing books. And then it was in this phase from 62 to 65 that he produced the Bhagavatam. He produced the Bhagavatam first canto. At that time he produced it in 3 volumes. 1 volume came out every year. Now this was a time that Srila Prabhupada was living in Vrindavan because Vrindavan was cheaper. Now Delhi was a city about 1.5 hours away from there, 2 hours away. That was a happening place. But Prabhupada did not have enough money to stay in Delhi. Even in Vrindavan, there are devotees who met him. Prabhupada's situation was such that writing books, he had very little resources. Later on, when devotees were helping him in printing his books, later on when the movement became big, Prabhupada had no money to even buy paper for writing his books. In 1968, when 1966, when one devotee Hagariv Prabhu, Howard Wheeler was helping Prabhupada type, he noticed that Prabhupada had his manuscript was written on the back of envelopes. When we get an envelope what happens is there's address, but otherwise the envelope is blank. So Prabhupada would open the envelope and he would stick something on the address slip and then he would write on the envelope. And that's how he had stapled things together. And whenever he would get paper, Prabhupada, because paper was so expensive, he didn't have money at that time, there would be no margins. Prabhupada would write from the left top to the right bottom. And like that, the Prabhupada didn't have money to buy paper, that time he made a vision of translating the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. It's several thousand verses. And Prabhupada made a plan, this will be a 50-volume book. Later on, they decided to change the plan, and now it's in 18 volumes, 12 cantos. But at that time, it was a 50-volume plan. And it's like, you don't have enough money to repair the leakage in your house, and you think, I'll build a skyscraper. That was Prabhupada. He was so untiring in his ambition. And he had to go here and there to get sponsorship. The first volume was printed finally. It took 1 year for Prabhupada. Not to write. Writing was easy for him. But to get the logistics, to get the book printed. And 62, 63, 64, 1 year, 1 volume. This is where, till now, everything that Srila Prabhupada had done, none of that had seemed to be successful. His business had not really been very successful. He had tried very hard, but it just managed to break even, not much to beyond that. He had tried to assist his godbrothers, that had not worked. Now books, when he started writing, this was the first time. The Bhagavatam is a very respected book in the Indian historical tradition. This was the first translation and commentary in English. So he was able to give this book to the President of India, who was quite spiritually minded. He gave it to the Prime Minister of India, and both of them gave endorsements, and they said that this book should go to all the libraries in India. And then sponsorship for the remaining volumes started flowing. Now this is the time when Prabhupada could have taken it easy. He said that, okay, maybe this is the service that Krishna wants me to do. I'll become an author, and in future years, people will read books, and then they will benefit. But for Prabhupada, his goal was not just to become an author. His goal was to inspire people spiritually. And book was one means to it. So he worked. And after that, you consider over here, Prabhupada took the greatest hardship in his life. That was in 65. At the age of 69, nearing 70, he decided, I will go to America. Now, normally speaking, for most people, they have big ambitions when they are young. If you ask a small kid, okay, maybe 8, 9, 10, what do you want to do? I want to become the president of the country. I want to become the latest YouTube celebrity. I want to become a millionaire. I want to become a billionaire. I want to become the world's wealthiest person. But then as you keep growing, we have big ambitions, but life keeps beating down our ambitions. By the time we graduate, we think, if I get a job, it will be good. Normally, when we face failures, slowly our ambitions start going down. Now, Prabhupada had faced so many setbacks. He had not, his outreach had not got any success in India. From 1922, he had been trying. From 1944, he had been trying in much more focused way. From 1955, that had been like more or less everything that he was doing. That was his singular focus. But he had nothing to show. There's one disciple who was also not a very serious disciple. Prabhupada had no success to show. And what did Prabhupada think? I will go to America. It's like some cricketer on his home territory has always got out as hero. And he says, I want to go to foreign territory and I'll score double century over there. His ambition was unbelievable. And still nothing was working out. And Prabhupada finally got the sponsorship. There's one relative, one acquaintance, passing acquaintance, who had a son in America. And he got him through his sponsorship. He said, the Agarwal family. And Prabhupada didn't even know this person very well. And when the mail came to him that he had got a sponsorship, Prabhupada was in such privation at that time, he didn't have a fixed address. And the letter that came from the American embassy, that was forwarded 4 times. Like sometimes a person leaves a home and they go to the so the forwarding address is there. So for Prabhupada's going to America, we have to thank the Indian postal system. That 4 times the letter was forwarded. And Prabhupada was surprised. He had to remember, who is this Mr. Agarwal? But now he got the sponsorship. and in terms of the legal sponsorship he had got. But now the money, how would he go abroad? So he came to meet one of his well-wishers who had organized some programs for him, Mrs. Scindia. She had a steamship company. And she told him, she was in India, the culture is if somebody is elder, respectable, you don't say a direct no to their face. So if you want to say no, just avoid meeting them. And hopefully they'll go where you don't have to say no. So Prabhupada wanted to meet her and he told the secretary what was the request. The secretary said, she is busy. Prabhupada waited from morning to evening. And Prabhupada said, unless I meet her, I will not go from here. Then in the evening when she was leaving and she said, Swamiji is here? Yes, he's been there for 8 hours. Yes, Swamiji, I have to rush now, but we'll meet tomorrow. And then the next day she met and said, Swamiji, if you want to speak the Bhagavatam, then you come to my house every evening, I'll hear Bhagavatam from you. Prabhupada said, that is not the kind of Bhagavatam. I don't want to do the ritual. He wanted to be spiritual. He wanted to transform. Then she said that, Swamiji, my assistants are telling me you're so old. You are so old and America is so cold. So you will die there. You're like a father for me. I cannot send you to your death like this. Prabhupada became very grave. And he said, if you really think that I am like your father, then please fulfill this last desire of your father. I'm at the fag end of my life now. This was the mission that my spiritual master had given me. Her heart melted and she agreed. When Prabhupada decided to go to America, this was the first time he had been on a ship for a long time. There was seasickness. And then there were heart attack, 1 heart attack, 2 heart attacks. It's unbearable pain. And there was no medical support at all. But still Prabhupada pressed on. Krishna came in a dream to him on the 3rd night. Prabhupada prayed to Krishna, Krishna, if a 3rd attack comes, I don't think I can survive. Krishna came in a dream and says, I have taken care of everything. So there's the captain of the steamship was Captain Pandya. His wife was also there on the ship. She said, Swamiji, we have traveled across the Atlantic many times. In the last 30-40 years of our travel, the Atlantic has never been so peaceful. So Prabhupada said, Krishna has taken charge of the ship. That ship was called Jaladuta. And when he landed there, this captain, Miss Pandya said that, Swamiji, that our ride was so peaceful. You come back with us, again it will be peaceful. Prabhupada said, Krishna has not arranged for me to come here to come back so quickly. Now, when Prabhupada landed in America, he didn't know whether to turn left or right. He knew nothing over there. He went to Butler, Pennsylvania. That was where his sponsor was there. It was immense hardship. See, hardship, when I talk about hardship, it was at many levels. First, there was this physical hardship that he had heart attacks, he had seasickness. When Prabhupada landed in America, it was the first thing, if you had a heart attack, you say, where's the hospital? I want to go and do a checkup. There's no record that Prabhupada ever even went to a hospital. When Prabhupada was coming to the American coast, his prayer was to Krishna, Nachao, Nachao, Prabhu, Nachao se mate. Kashtera putliyata Nachao se mate. Make me dance, O Lord, make me dance. Prabhupada says, when he's coming to America, Krishna, you have been very merciful to me. Boro krupa koile Krishna damera prati. You have been very merciful to me. From a material perspective, we may say, what is the mercy? He's old, he's had heart attacks, he has no money, he has no institutional support, he has no followers. What is the mercy? For Prabhupada, the mercy was that he has finally been able to come to America. He has no facility for sharing the message of bhakti, but he is grateful that I at least have the opportunity. So that is the positive attitude of a devotee. Think, Krishna, you are so merciful to me. Prabhupada is saying, Krishna, you must have some plan for me. Ache kichu karja tabe ei anumane. Nahe keno ani bena ei ugrastane. You must have some plan for me. Otherwise, why would you bring me here? So that is the faith of a devotee. Krishna, you have not brought me this far to abandon me now. You will take me all the way. That is a faith we all can have. We have all gone through difficulties in our life. Sometimes we feel, I'm all alone. Is there any support for me? But if Krishna has brought us this far, He's taken us all the way ahead also. So there's physical hardship, but that was only the smallest of hardships. Then there was cultural hardship. Cultural hardship was the place where Prabhupada was staying for the first time. No, they were Indians. There was an Indian-American couple, the Gopal Agarwal and Sally Agarwal. And at that time in America, there was a great protein myth that if you don't eat meat, if you don't eat beef, you won't have enough proteins. So in the same fridge where Prabhupada would have his bhoga for offering to Krishna, there would be beef over there. And Sally Agarwal, she understood this. Swami doesn't eat meat. She says, Swami, sorry, I have only one fridge and we don't have anywhere else to keep our food. Prabhupada, think nothing about it. Prabhupada was tolerant, but it was difficult for him. Then, after cultural difficulty, there was logistical difficulty. Logistical was Prabhupada moved. In Butler, he was just like a curiosity object. Who is this Swami who's come from India? How does he dress? How does he cook? What does he chant? But people are not interested in seeing him as a spiritual teacher. If that had been the age of social media, people would have said, Swamiji, one selfie, please. It would have been they were interested in selfie, not in self-realization. So Prabhupada moved from there to, he came to Philadelphia to give some talks. Then he came to New York. When he came to New York, there was a yoga studio over there. And that yoga teacher was friendly, but there was a philosophical difference. He said, Swami, you can do kirtans, but you cannot give talks. Prabhupada said, that's not what I have come here for. And then this was a time when he moved to the Lower East Side. That is where it was a hippie area. There was drugs, and the hardship that Prabhupada faced was also not just logistical. Where will he stay? Now he stayed at one place, and then he was robbed from that place. He had very little possessions. He had a dictaphone. He was a typewriter. Whatever little he had was robbed. And Prabhupada suspected the robber was not somebody else. The robber was the janitor only. And when that happened, it was very demoralizing. He's all alone. He has very little resources. He has practically no friends. Then beyond that came what was probably the most devastating hardship. He was staying in the Lower East Side with one young man, David Allen, who seemed to be ready to become a devotee, probably his first American disciple. And then one day, this David, who had been a drug user and had stopped using it, suddenly he took drugs again, and he had an episode. He just went mad, and he came to attack Prabhupada. And he went wild, and Prabhupada was in a 3-story building. He just had to leave, and he was on the road. He was as homeless as many of the hippies who were just lying on the streets over there. So, no, this was not just a physical danger. No, this was more like a danger of, you could say, almost like an existential danger. What do you mean existential means? Not just a danger to his existence, but to his very purpose. See, if a doctor goes to treat a patient, and while treating the patient only goes wild and attacks the doctor. The doctor may think, why am I even here? Why should I even treat these people? Are these people even treatable? So this, somebody who could be a potential disciple turning around to attack him. This was probably the most devastating time for Prabhupada. The hardship. See, for the spiritual master, when they try to share bhakti, this is one of the greatest dangers. The people towards whom they are trying to extend themselves. If those people turn bad, if those people turn violent, if those people turn malicious. So already his godbrothers had told him that, these Western people cannot become devotees. That these Western people, one of his spiritual godbrothers had gone to UK, 2 of his godbrothers, and they had gone, the spiritual master had funded their mission fully. And after trying for 2-3 years, they came back. And when they came back, the spiritual master came to meet them at the port. And the first thing they said in replying is, your process doesn't work. So those words would have been there in the back of his mind. But Prabhupada kept persisting. And this was the time when, for him, He was all, the neighborhood where he had gone to, the Lower East Side, that was a trigger happy neighborhood. People would take drugs. America is a country where people can have guns. That is, people would just go crazy and start shooting also. But this was a place where Prabhupada was staying. And then, while he was staying there, slowly, so from 65 to 66, probably was the period of the greatest hardship. The hardship continued, but here, this Prabhupada voluntarily went there at that age and took up that immense hardship for the sake of his spiritual master's mission. And then, from 66 onwards, the success that started coming, what is most spectacular about the success was its unlikeliness. The audience that came to him was probably the most unlikely audience that anybody could have thought about. See, from the Indian perspective, from the West is often considered to be a land that is degraded. Mhm. Now, the hippies were a very peculiar phenomena in Western culture. Now, the word hippies has become very normalized in some ways. But the hippies were considered degraded even by the West. So they were considered degraded by those whom the followers of the Vedic culture considered degraded. And for them, Prabhupada had lived such a pure life, he had never drunk even tea or coffee in his life, his entire life. And here there were people for whom breaking all the regulative principles was a regulative principle. Their idea was rebel against mainstream society. So, these people, they were remarkable phenomena in American history. Somehow, they had got the idea that they were somewhat spiritually inclined, but they had the idea that you become spiritual by taking drugs. So, what is the unlikeliness? It was their habits were extremely unclean. In the history of the world, there is hardly any other religious or spiritual movement where the distance between the guru and the followers was so great. The distance was in terms of age, the distance was in terms of education. Prabhupada was educated in British colonial education. Many of his disciples were dropouts from colleges, those who became disciples. In terms of religion, they were born in Christian or Jewish background. At that time, people didn't even know who Krishna was. When Prabhupada, when the devotees first saw something of Hanuman, there's a picture of Hanuman, they thought, Swami, is this a rabbit or is this a cat? What is it? They had no idea what it was. So in terms of religion, there was difference. In terms of, we could say, intellectual background. No. Prabhupada had not extensively studied Western philosophy and they had not studied anything Indian. Then, of course, in terms of culture, there was a huge difference. As I said, Prabhupada's habits were very pure. For them, it is completely impure. So, it is from a material perspective, if somebody were going to start a business, now normally you start a business where there is likely to be a market for the product that you are selling. This was the unlikeliest of markets. Now, we could say, one of the biggest differences was not just culture, but it was also the standards. Prabhupada went to America. I'll explain what standards mean. At that time, this was a phase where people were interested in spirituality, but their idea was, we will become, these young people, it was a hippie, they thought that drugs is the way to spirituality. There was a drug which was very popular called LSD. Now, LSD is the short form for a chemical name, but these people had renamed that drug. They called it as the League of Spiritual Discovery. So anybody who takes this drug, they join the League of Spiritual Discovery. And what would happen? That when people would take drugs, often people become incoherent and they speak all kinds of crazy things. But they would have the idea, if you've taken LSD and you're speaking after that, then you are a LSD saint. That means you have got some glimpse into another domain of reality. And from there, you're speaking some rare wisdom. Like if you have been in India in some traditional temples, especially with the goddess, sometimes people get possessed by something and they just start dancing wildly like dervishes. And at that time that happens, everybody says, don't touch that person, that the goddess has come in the body of that person. Now whether the goddess has come or not, but the idea is that those people are considered like sacred. So in some way. So when Prabhupada started giving his classes, all kinds of weird things would happen. One time he was giving a class, and suddenly one hippie got up. Swamiji, I want to speak. And Prabhupada said, questions after the class. He said, no, I don't have a question. I want to speak. And Prabhupada said, after the class. And that hippie just got up, and there was no asana at that time. There was just a stage on which Prabhupada would sit. That hippie just climbed up and sat on the stage next to Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada just looked at it. Prabhupada continued speaking. But then he was just looking at Prabhupada, glaring at Prabhupada. And Prabhupada noticed nobody could pay attention. So then Prabhupada just picked up a kartal and started doing kirtan. And throughout the kirtan, the hippie was just glaring at him. And then kirtan got over. Prabhupada didn't have any money at that time to cook any prasad and give. So he would just get an apple, and he would cut the apple into small pieces, and he would give some pieces as prasad. So he had that apple and he had a knife, and he cut the apple, and with everyone watching, Prabhupada extended his hand. On one side was the knife, the other side was the sliced apple, and he gave it to the hippie. Now this hippie was sitting, he was big, bulky. He looked at Prabhupada, he looked at the apple, he looked at the knife. He looked at Prabhupada, he looked at the apple, he looked at the knife, he looked at Prabhupada. And everybody fell completely silent. And then he extended his hand. And everybody heaved a sigh of relief when he reached to the apple. And he took the apple. So this was an extremely difficult audience. There's an article published in one of the newspapers over there. It says, Swamiji is trying to talk about God to the toughest audience in the entire world. At that time, it was 1966-67, that time, Times had published an article called God is Dead. That created a sensation in the cultural, intellectual circles at that time. But the unlikeliness of Prabhupada's success is mind-boggling. Prabhupada started doing kirtan, and Prabhupada had gone there on a 2-month visa. And he kept extending the 2-month visa. Little bit more, little bit more, little bit more. Eventually, it seemed that the visa would not get extended. So they said Prabhupada did not have money to hire any high-powered attorney. So there was one of his students. He said that, Swamiji, one of the ways you can make your visa permanent is when people do this, many people who go to another country, they get married, they have a fake marriage or whatever. So he said, if you have a relationship with someone, then you can get it. So then Prabhupada told, you adopt me as your son. No, Prabhupada was the age of their grandfather. So when the visa was not getting extended, Prabhupada at one time made a plan that he will relocate to Canada. Canada, it seemed easier to get the visa. I've been to the Montreal temple. We have a beautiful center. That Prabhupada had even said that Montreal will be our international headquarters. So but somehow Prabhupada pushed on. But this is a little later. While he was here in America, he decided to start going out for kirtans. People would like kirtans over there, would like music. So he went to Tompkins Square Park, one of the first kirtans. Just sat down there and started singing. And kept singing and kept singing. Prabhupada just closed his eyes and kept singing. And there are a few people who had attended his program, they started dancing. And others started dancing. After 20-25 minutes, Prabhupada opened his eyes. And there are 60-70 people, all of them were dancing. And this was the beginning. And Prabhupada was so unassuming. I met 2-3 Prabhupada disciples who were there for that program. And they said that we had to watch for 10-15 minutes, so not at least 5-10 minutes, before we even spotted Prabhupada and realized that he is actually the center. Because everybody is dancing in their own way, doing all kind of things. Everyone was watching the spectacle. And then they noticed, okay, this is the person who is singing. Because at that time, people didn't know so well. Normally when we do kirtan, it's responsive. One person sings and the other person sings after that. Everybody sings after that. But everybody is singing like that only over there. So Prabhupada felt that this is where things are starting. So in Tompkins Square Park, even now there is that tree under which Prabhupada had sat and sung. and the New York government has put a plaque under the tree. They call it the Hare Krishna tree. And this is from here. They say it is from here that the Hare Krishna movement began. So that was Srila Prabhupada. The unlikeliness of his success was remarkable, but Prabhupada kept pushing on. Then when he went to from there, some of his disciples went to San Francisco, the other end of the country. And there, Prabhupada had gone. Prabhupada was sick. He could not go out much. But he was just walking and chanting in his room, and he saw a flatbed truck. And he thought, no, we will put Jagannath on the truck, and this will become a Rath for Jagannath. No, that was his Krishna consciousness. You see, how many people can think of a truck and think this will be a cart for Jagannath? And Prabhupada did that. And that became sensationally successful. The hippies like to do crazy things. And even for them also, dancing on the road in public, that was far out. And if they tried to dance on the road, the police would have arrested him. But now with Rath Yatra, they were dancing on the road and the police were escorting them. So that was Prabhupada. The unlikeliness of what was happening was spectacular. And then from here, so this was from 66 onwards, things started growing till 70. Prabhupada started having enormous, unlikely success. Then from 70, he started shifting his focus to India. He continued visiting America, but he started focusing on India. And when he came to India, he started tapping the cultural pride of Indians. So, PRHUPAD. So, P is the pride of. So, I'll explain this, what happened exactly over here. That before Prabhupada, many other spiritual teachers had also gone to America. And they had also got some success. But Prabhupada was the first person who had brought about a cultural transformation. He had got Western people to become so inspired that they had started wearing dhoti kurta and saris. And for Indians, it was stunning. And there's a Times of India article that came at that time. He said that these Western people have ruled India now. It is now Indian culture is conquering the West. And that cultural pride, Prabhupada tapped it to. Now, somehow Indians at that time were still not ready to commit to spirituality as sadhakas. They were pious people, but they didn't want to practice serious sadhana and become devotees. So Prabhupada decided to tap their cultural pride. Okay, our culture is so big. Prabhupada decided we'll build big temples. So he started engaging devotees. Many people became life members, and life membership at that time became so prestigious. There's one devotee who showed me a picture. There was one lawyer in the 1970s. He and his BA, MA, LLB ISKCON life member. That was written on the life nameplate itself. So it became so glamorous at that time. And there are talks of Prabhupada where Prabhupada is tapping this potential for Indians. He says that this is the Bhagavad-gita is the message from India. And to preach the Bhagavad-gita in India, I have to get people from outside India. He says, you are Indians. You take this message, you learn it, and you share it all over the world. Prabhupada sometimes use commercial language. He says, Hindi mein bole, Bhagavad-gita ke liye bahut market hai duniya mein. There's so many people who want to learn about it. And the way Krishna consciousness, so many people took it up at that time. They did not necessarily become disciples, but they became life members. Now, Prabhupada was always aware at the background. So, P was pride. He tapped the cultural pride of Indians, even if they're not ready to practice bhakti. That is the glory of a Acharya. And if you cannot take the mission forward in one way, you take it forward in another way. So, in the West, Prabhupada had disciples. And in India, he had life members. And both of them, they were appreciative of Prabhupada in their own different ways. So now, Prabhupada, right from the 70s, started thinking about succession. He knew that he would not be there all the time. So one of his biggest services was training his disciples. That is, for him, he started giving his disciples entrusting responsibilities to them. Apprenticeship is basically like training. So for his disciples, it was not just like a ritual initiation, you attend a fire sacrifice. In the 1970 itself, Prabhupada started the GBC. In 1968 itself, when he had come back from India after he had been sick, he met his disciples, and at that time they had a replica of a globe, a circular globe. And Prabhupada told his students, he says, all of you take one country, go and preach and deliver that country. Now, his students at that time were 18, 20, 21, 22 years old. The oldest person at that time was about 25. And the Jadurani Mataji, she was just an 18-year-old girl. She said, Swamiji, what about us girls? Prabhupada said, we are not boys or girls. We are souls who are servants of Krishna. You also pick up one country and go. So that was Prabhupada empowering people. So he encouraged disciples to take responsibility. His apprenticeship was not that, I was not going to micromanage people. But Prabhupada had this capacity. For Prabhupada, Krishna was not a distant God. Krishna was not a divinity to be realized in the future. Krishna was a living, loving, present reality. And those who were with Prabhupada, they felt that Prabhupada made Krishna real for them. When Prabhupada would say, how will we go to a distant country and preach? Prabhupada said, you pray to Krishna, Krishna will help you. So the preaching that happened under Prabhupada, by inspiration, as inspiration, devotees went to practically every part of the world. We know what Prabhupada did here in Australia. All the devotees were not very well trained. He installed deities and he encouraged them to establish deity worship. So he was creating a legacy. He was training his disciples. You take responsibility. This is your mission. This is not just my mission. This is our mission. And that brings the last part. D is detachment. See, normally, when we work extremely hard to achieve something, then we want to see it happen. And if it doesn't happen, we can get very easily a little frustrated. There was no project for which Srila Prabhupada worked as hard as one particular project. Does anyone know which was that? Juhu. So now the Juhu project was going to be like a signature project. It was going to be the biggest temple that he was going to build, grandest temple. It was in Mumbai. And he practically fought for that land and for that temple. There was the owner who was a double-dealing political kind of very politically minded person, and that person wanted to take the money and not give the land also. When he passed away, his wife escalated matters and she sent thugs on the property to beat up the devotees. Several of the devotees were beaten up, they were arrested, the temple was almost demolished. It was practically a war. Prabhupada fought that much to build that temple. And does anyone know when the Juhu temple was inaugurated? Yes, it was Jan 14, 1978. When did Srila Prabhupada depart from the world? Yes, November 14, 1977. Now this was the biggest project of Srila Prabhupada's life. And it was just 2 months away. Now, anybody who's worked very hard to achieve something, I want to see this happen, I want to see this through. But when Prabhupada's body started falling apart, one of his well-wishers, followers asked him, Swamiji, do you have any last desires? Prabhupada said, Kuch ichha nahi. Kuch ichha nahi. I have no desire. Now would Prabhupada not have desired to see the Juhu temple? Of course. But this is ultimately the test of devotion. Now devotion means that if we are in this world and Krishna is in the spiritual world, so we want to offer the things of this world to Krishna. We have a desire. Okay, I want to build a beautiful house, and in that I'll have a magnificent altar. Or I want to do this for Krishna. I want to do this for Krishna. So there is the desire to offer things to Krishna. And that's a wonderful desire, the noble desire. But the test of our desire is that our desire for Krishna, the desire to be with Krishna, should be greater than our desire to offer things to Krishna. Sometimes what happens, I've seen this across the world, there are many devotees who want to serve very earnestly. But then, when they're trying to do something, maybe start a Goshala, build a temple, do some preaching program, do some college preaching, whatever it is they want to do. And when somehow they're trying to do it and others are not cooperating, others are not supporting, others are putting in obstacles, then they often become very bitter. This person like this, that person like that. And you just start talking with them, like so much poison comes out. They are eager to serve, but unfortunately, that eagerness to serve has transformed into bitterness. Because there's an obstacle in the service. And somebody is becoming the obstacle. Now, it's understandable, but still it's undesirable. In trying to offer the world to Krishna, we may end up making our heart unofferable to Krishna. If our heart is bitter, filled with bitterness towards devotees, bitterness towards other people, then what are we offering to Krishna? So Prabhupada, through his last lesson, he demonstrated, while we want to do wonderful things for Krishna, but ultimately, Krishna should be more important than the things we want to offer to him. So, the final lesson that Prabhupada taught was that we learn to accept Krishna's will gracefully. So, the lesson that I mentioned this point many times. One Mataji in America, she asked me, why was Krishna so cruel to Prabhupada? Could Krishna not have let Prabhupada live for 2 months? He could have seen the Juhu temple inauguration. I said, I don't know what Krishna was thinking, but if we look at the context, we can see that Prabhupada saw it that Krishna wants me to teach a different lesson. The lesson that Krishna ultimately matters more than the world. And Prabhupada was in Vrindavan and Prabhupada gracefully departed from the world. Till his last moments, he was dictating the Bhagavatam purports, he was hearing Krishna Katha, he was hearing Krishna Kirtan, and he accepted Krishna's will gracefully. Ultimately, that is you could say that is the most important sign of devotion. That what we do in the world is important, but for whom we do, that person is even more important. So that detachment from the things of this world is Prabhupada's sign of, one of the greatest signs of Prabhupada's extraordinary devotion. He did extraordinary things for Krishna and he was ready to leave behind extraordinary things, having faith that this is not my mission, this is Krishna's mission. It's not that I have to do everything. If Krishna wants, Krishna will make things happen through others. And we are blessed to be among those others. The mission that Prabhupada started, his disciples have carried it forward. From 108 temples, now we have almost 700 temples across the world. We have 700 centers with many more centers and temples coming up constantly. That mission has spread. And that legacy is there for all of us to ourselves accept and to share with others. The gift that we get from the spiritual master. What is that gift ultimately? Prabhupada said once that I have inherited the legacy of my spiritual master. Now Prabhupada did not inherit anything. He did not get any money. He did not get any temples. He did not get any disciples. The legacy of the spiritual master is the desire to glorify Krishna. Krishna is such a wonderful Lord. I want the whole world to know about Krishna. How can anyone have a meaningful life if their life is not filled with love for Krishna? I want to share that with everyone. That was the legacy that Prabhupada got. From that desire to glorify Krishna came temples. From that desire to glorify Krishna came books. From that desire to glorify Krishna came devotees. And is that desire to glorify Krishna, that is Srila Prabhupada's gift for all of us. We relish Krishna's glories and we share those glories with others. That is what will make our life enriched. While we are in this world with a deep and satisfying purpose, it will become enriched. Ultimately, that is what will reunite us with Krishna beyond this world. I'll summarize. We discussed about Prabhupada's glories today, various aspects of Prabhupada's life. So P was what? Anyone remembers? Principles. Yes, that was pride came later. Good. Principles. That was Prabhupada. We see pre-1992 also. 1922, before he met Prabhupada, he was ready to sacrifice the degree for his principles. He got education, but for the sake of the independence struggle, he was ready to give that up. Then R was responsibility. So from 22 to almost 55, he was doing this responsibility as a householder. While he was doing that, he was trying to gain artha, wealth, so that he could use it for service, for preaching the mission. And that is when he also worked very hard. He tried his business at various places. He also studied Shastra when he could. And he was preparing his life for a future mission. Then A was? Yes. So when he started focusing on preaching, he couldn't focus on preaching. So almost from 33 when he took initiation, and especially from 44 onwards till 55, he was assisting his godbrothers. So his spiritual master had departed. So he was sometimes staying in their mission, staying in their ashram, assisting them in editing the magazines. He was working very hard. Then after that, B was books. So he focused from 62 to 64 in writing the Bhagavatam. The first canto he published in 3 volumes. And that was where he could have stayed on and very easily completed the Bhagavatam. But then that's when he decided to, H was hardship. He himself took the extraordinary hardship of going to America. To America at the age, so the hardship was many things. It was physical, that he was 69, he was not in good health, he had a heart attack. Beyond physical, it was cultural. The people who they had no clean habits. He had to live in places where this was, and logistically, he didn't even know where he would stay, to go from one place to another. And ultimately, that was relational. The very people whom he was trying to elevate, one of them turned and attacked him. But through this hardship, Prabhupada was never quit. He kept pushing on. And then, when success came, U was unlikeliness. From all the audience, somebody could have imagined that Prabhupada might get. The hippies were the least likely. We discussed that between the hippies and Srila Prabhupada, there was age difference, there was a cultural, there was a education difference, there was a experienced intellectual difference, there was a religious difference, there was a cultural difference. Practically every way they were different. But somehow they had a spiritual spark. But that doesn't mean they make them easy. They were interested in drugs, but Prabhupada somehow connected with them and started preaching to them. Then after that, P was pride. When he came back to India, he activated the cultural pride of Indians. And he inspired Indians, even if they can't practice bhakti in terms of becoming sadhakas, they can at least support the culture which is being appreciated all over the world. That's how he started having grand temples. Then A was apprenticeship. He did not think that I alone am going to do everything. So he had that vision that others have to carry on this mission. So he was training them. He was empowering his disciples. And Prabhupada, not just I know Krishna and I love Krishna. He says, Krishna is there for you. With Prabhupada, everybody felt like Krishna was a living, loving, immediate reality. And last D was detachment. That Prabhupada demonstrated that the project that he had worked for the most, Krishna wanted somebody else to complete it, and Prabhupada was ready to accept that. His desire for Krishna was greater than was his desire to offer things to Krishna. So he was not attached to anything in this world. And Prabhupada achieved all this thing. The desire for Krishna is ultimately the gift of the Guru. Is what? The one what Prabhupada inherited from his disciples is, from his Guru, is that the desire to glorify Krishna. So we all can pray to Srila Prabhupada that he may enrich our heart with this desire to glorify Krishna, and that desire will fill our life with meaning, with purpose, and will ultimately reunite us with Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Krishna Bhagwan ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrind ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.